As the saying goes, pressure crushed the carbon to make the diamond. But as we know, carbon is bad, and so, to the great relief of the sustainability crowd, there won't be any human diamonds around here. I just had the opportunity to read an advanced copy of Dennis Barrett's new book, Endgame. In it, he talks about certain cons of the global elite. Early on in the book, he talks about their false claims of overpopulation based on the 18th century writings of economist Thomas Malthus. What Malthus said was that since human population increases exponentially and food production only increases arithmetically, we wouldn't have enough food to feed the global population, whereupon Barrett points out that Malthus didn't account for one thing. More people means more minds, and that means more innovation. He wrote, Malthus missed an important, indeed crucial factor. More people means more minds. More minds that work in a society unencumbered by arbitrary restrictions means more innovation. Each innovation leads to improvements in production, in the quality and availability of goods and services, and in the increase of welfare for every person. He added, Malthus was wrong. Under market conditions, there was great reward waiting for those who could devise better and more productive ways of working. This led to rapid developments in technology in all sectors, including in chemistry and agriculture. So rapid were these advances that food production soon outstripped population growth. For most of human history, famine caused by varieties of natural disaster had been a real and ongoing problem. Since the rise of the modern market economy, however, famine as a factor in human life has essentially disappeared. This point is brought up by Drew Godefreidi in his book, The Green Reich. He says, the resources of an economy are not limited to so-called raw materials. Let us go to the other end of the economic chain and look at the chicken population. When man lived by hunting and gathering, the chicken population numbered less than 100,000 on the surface of the earth. Today, it is in the billions. The reserve/resource conceptual couple cannot account for the capacity of man to create resources. So what the global population reductionists want you to believe is that resources are finite and that only human population expands. This, they say, is the reason why we have to limit population growth. But this is a logical fallacy. It wants you to think that reality is linear, when in fact, it's exponential. Things don't remain static. They change. Man dragged himself up from savagery when he realized that he didn't have to be a slave to circumstances. He could make his own luck. Like when our caveman forebears were hunter-gatherers and chased bison. When we leveled up to the pastoral level of society, we realized, hey, I don't have to chase animals anymore. I can breed them and have a permanent food supply. Thus, they herded goats and cows. They leveled up even more with farming. Instead of being the hapless victims of nature, man could alter his environment and wring resources from it that were previously unimaginable from the wild jungle. This, of course, became even more exaggerated when we had the agricultural revolution in the 1300s, and Europeans discovered how to do crop rotation and how to add nitrates to the soil. Food yields went up tenfold. Not every place on the planet had the agricultural revolution, and many countries still haven't had it. But Native Americans got to see it on display when they first encountered Europeans and were stunned by the food supplies that the Europeans had, and how they were more interested in gold than in food. In The Wealth of Nations, Adam Smith writes, the poor inhabitants of Cuba and St. Domingo, when they were first discovered by the Spaniards, used to wear little bits of gold as ornaments in their hair and other parts of their dress. They seemed to value them as we would do any little pebbles of somewhat more than ordinary beauty, and to consider them as just worth the picking up, but not worth the refusing of anybody who asked them. They gave them to their new guests at the first request, without seeming to think that they had made them any very valuable present. They were astonished to observe the rage of the Spaniards to obtain them, and had no notion that there could anywhere be a country in which people had the disposal of so great a superfluity of food. So scanty always among themselves, that for a very small quantity of those glittering baubles, they would willingly give as much as might maintain a whole family for many years. For the Native Americans' part, they were far more preoccupied with the food surpluses the Europeans had. That was wealth. The natives had never seen so much food, given the fact that they were hunter-gatherers and hadn't gone through the agricultural revolution yet. The Europeans had gone through it in the 1300s, so to them, tons of food wasn't a big deal. In fact, the vast amount of surpluses actually diminished its perceived value. My realization in reading Dennis Barrett's book, Endgame, was that with all these surpluses, human violence has gone down. Think about it this way. According to Alvin Toffler in The Third Wave, it would require land the size of Manhattan to feed a tribe of 50 hunter-gatherers. If they allowed in another tribe, there would be resource depletion, and they would starve. So to protect themselves, they would wage war on the other tribe. Violence wasn't a choice, it was a necessity for survival. This was the origin of war, fighting over food. Now we're in what's being called the post-scarcity economic model, where we have so much food that the Department of Agriculture actually has to pay farmers not to grow to keep the spot prices high.
But consider this. Almost anybody at any time in the nation today can get very calorie-dense food, and even things like processed meats and fruit that would have been the reserve of royal feasts a few hundred years ago. People today also have access to information on a level unimaginable to even full-time scholars 50 years ago. We also take things like international travel, machines that wash and dry our clothes, perfectly cooked food, keep our houses cool and warm at the flip of a switch or whatever, entirely for granted. These things that are afforded to us as almost expectations today would have been the domain of the gods to people in past civilizations. So, for them, looking forward, the United States of America, and by extension the Western world, would look like a post-scarcity civilization.
According to philosopher David Hume, justice is commonly defined to be a constant and perpetual will of giving everyone his due. According to Hume, law first arose with the concept of property. It evolved as a method to protect and/or apportion finite possessions. Hume says that in a world of infinite property and endless goods, law, and by extension justice, would be irrelevant. In a post-scarcity world, all our needs could be met, and we have that technology now. We had that technology 100 years ago. But now, certain powers are trying to strangle it off. They want the scarcity model. Their power depends on it. A certain global oligarchical elite wants to reinstate synthetic scarcity under new climate change rules, restrict energy use, and plunge us back into a pre-civilized state. The danger of this new green agenda is that it reverses millennia of progress and makes us slaves of nature once again, and not its masters, with the attendant risk of instigating a renewed orgy of violence as people are forced to fight again for limited resources. Primitive tribal societies were almost constantly at war. This tapered off in civilized nations as food became plentiful. But when food chains are collapsed and food productivity is sabotaged, I'll give you 3 guesses as to what happens next. I mentioned that I read an advanced copy of Endgame by Dennis Barrett. It was the inspiration for this presentation. Dennis is the publisher of the New American Magazine, and I'm giving him a plug without his knowledge or consent, just out of the sheer joy of reading a well-written book. Endgame will be released in March. When it is, check it out.